My name is Elise, and up until a few weeks ago, I was the quiet one in the corner of the legal department. I kept my head down, did my work, and believed that if I followed the rules, I'd be fine. But that morning in the glass-walled conference room, with every executive watching, I realized rules don't protect you when someone powerful decides you're in the way. David Crane, our chief risk officer, stood inches from me with his voice raised loud enough to rattle the blinds. He waved a printed report in my face and told me I was either going to revise the numbers to match his projections or start packing my things. The air in the room went still, like everyone had collectively decided not to breathe. I said no. I said it clearly, calmly, and without blinking. And that was when he smirked, looked around the table, and called me just a secretary with a legal degree. I felt something twist in my stomach. It wasn't fear, not yet. It was a shame. Like he had just peeled my skin off in front of a dozen people who wouldn't meet my eyes. When I reminded him that what he was asking me to do was illegal, he leaned in and said it louder. Said I didn't understand the stakes. That in the real world, people bend things all the time to keep the machine moving. I was aware of every eye in that room, every colleague whose silence felt heavier than the marble table we sat around. Nobody stepped in. Nobody spoke. Then he delivered the final blow. Told me if I couldn't follow orders, I didn't belong there, that I was disposable, replaceable. I gathered the report, pushed my chair in, and told him I'd need that in writing. My voice didn't shake, but my hands did. As I walked out, I could feel him watching me, waiting for me to look back. I didn't. I walked straight to my office, locked the door behind me, and tried not to throw up. I had no plan, no backup, just a firm decision that I wasn't going to lie to protect someone who had built his power on fear. I didn't know it then, but that moment was the beginning of everything. The morning after the meeting, I sat frozen in my office, replaying every second of what had happened. My inbox was full of unread emails, but one subject line stopped me cold. It read simply, "You're not alone." Inside was a single audio file. I clicked play, and there it was. David's voice, clear as day, barking orders, threatening me, mocking me. Then my voice, steady but tense, refused to falsify the report. The entire confrontation had been recorded. There was no sender, no name, just a throwaway address and a digital fingerprint that led nowhere. I didn't know whether to feel terrified or grateful. I closed my door and leaned back in my chair, listening again with headphones this time. My hands were clammy. My heart pounded in my throat. Someone had been in that room and decided to record him. Someone knew what he was doing and had decided to help me. But who? And why? Later that day, things got worse. I heard the whispers before I saw the stares. People stopped talking when I entered the break room. Someone from finance avoided eye contact completely. By mid-afternoon, a colleague finally clued me in. David was telling people I had a meltdown, that I'd been reprimanded for mishandling sensitive data, that I was being watched. He was doing what powerful men always do, rewriting the story before anyone else could tell it. My team, the one I'd supported through 3 audits and 2 system overhauls, had gone silent. No texts, no support, not even a glance of solidarity in the hallway. I was alone, isolated, and I knew if I didn't act soon, I'd be buried. So I did something I never thought I'd have the nerve to do. I requested a private meeting with Madeline Knox, the CEO. Not through email. I printed a short note and hand-delivered it to her assistant, then walked away before she could ask questions. I didn't sleep that night. I watched the shadows on my ceiling crawl like silent warnings. By the next morning, I had a reply. A short message from Madeline's office asking me to meet her at 3 p.m. No additional context. I spent the next 6 hours rehearsing what I would say and how I would say it. Then, I scrapped it all and rehearsed again. When 3 o'clock came, I walked into her corner office with my shoulders back and the audio file loaded on my phone. She didn't smile. She didn't offer me coffee. She simply gestured to the seat across from her and waited. Her expression was unreadable. Her presence is commanding without effort. I told her everything. Not just about the meeting, but about the rumors, the fear, the silence spreading through the halls like smoke. I handed her the recording, without saying a word. She listened. Then she sat back and said nothing for what felt like a full minute. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was calm, almost cold. She said, if I was telling the truth, and the evidence held up, I was going to need to be very careful. She told me David was well connected, that he'd survived worse, that I shouldn't expect anyone to back me unless I brought her something undeniable. Then she told me to keep quiet, and to keep digging. As I left her office, my legs felt heavy, but my mind was sharper than it had been in days. The rules had changed. This wasn't just about protecting my job anymore. This was about survival. The door to Madeline Knox's office closed behind me with a soft click that sounded louder than it should have. She didn't rise to greet me, didn't gesture toward the chair. Just sat there behind her stark white desk, a minimalist painting behind her, the city skyline casting long shadows across the floor. She studied me like a chess master sizing up an unfamiliar opponent. I sat without being asked, and placed my phone on the desk between us. Her expression didn't change. No warmth, no judgment. Just precision. I told her what happened in the conference room. I gave her dates, names, and context. I didn't beg. I didn't cry. I spoke clearly, measured, like someone who had already accepted the worst and was just here to log it before disappearing. Then I played the recording. David's voice filled the room, harsh and confident. Then my voice, quieter but firm. The moment of silence that followed was long and deliberate. Madeline finally leaned forward and tapped the screen to stop playback before it ended. She asked me one question. Why bring this to her, and not to legal or HR? I told her the truth. That I didn't trust either. That David had friends in both departments, and by the time anyone official moved, I'd be long gone, branded the problem. She nodded once, like she already knew that answer. She didn't argue, didn't defend the system, just stared at me. Then she said something I wasn't expecting. She told me she believed me, but belief wasn't enough. Not now. Not with David Crane. She said he had buried people before. Quietly. That if I wanted real action, I'd need more than a recording. I'd need a pattern. A paper trail. Something indisputable. Something that couldn't be spun. She asked if I was willing to go further. Not as a whistleblower. As an observer. Someone on the inside who could pull the right threads without tipping off the whole system. I sat there for a moment, trying to decide if she was giving me an opportunity or setting me up to fail. Maybe both. She said if I got her real evidence, not just one heated exchange, but something that showed intention, corruption, risk to the company, then she'd act. And if I couldn't, then she'd have to act like this meeting never happened. There was no safety net in her voice. No promises. Just a cold, clear challenge. I asked her why she was trusting me at all. She tilted her head slightly and said she wasn't. She was trusting the risk-reward ratio. That's how she survived in her position. That's how I might survive, too. I walked out of that office feeling like I'd just signed something without reading the fine print. My hands shook, but my thoughts were already turning. If Ewers is going to do this, it has to be airtight. No assumptions, no shortcuts. David thought he'd silenced me, and Madeline had just handed me a scalpel and pointed me back into the operating room. It wasn't revenge I felt. Not yet. It was clarity. For the first time in days, I had a direction, and I knew exactly where to start. I found her name buried in an old compliance thread from 2 years ago. Maya Langston. Former executive assistant to David Crane. She left the company quietly, no LinkedIn updates, no exit memo, just gone one Monday without warning. People whispered, but no one asked. I tracked her down through a friend who used to work in vendor management. It took 3 messages before she agreed to meet. We sat in a low-key coffee shop 2 blocks from my apartment. She wore oversized sunglasses even indoors and kept glancing toward the door. She didn't say hello. She just asked why now. I told her what happened in the conference room, the audio file, the silence that followed. Her shoulders sank. Then she said she wasn't surprised. David had always been like that. It was only a matter of time. She admitted she was part of the cover-ups, not because she wanted to be, because saying no meant being erased, and she couldn't afford to be erased. Not back then. She told me about the travel reimbursements that didn't line up, the third-party vendors who were paid without ever delivering services. The consulting firm David used didn't exist beyond a P.O. box. She said she kept copies, not to blackmail, to protect herself in case it ever came back to her. They were on an old drive, locked in a box in her garage. She never looked at it again. Said it made her stomach turn, but she offered it to me. No conditions. Just handed me a battered flash drive like it was nothing. I didn't know what to say. She just shrugged and said, "Someone needs to finish what I couldn't. And maybe, if I were smart, I'd do it fast." We sat in silence for a minute. Not awkward, just heavy. Then I asked why she agreed to meet. She looked at me and said, "Because you're the first one who ever asked." That night, I plugged the drive into my laptop. Dozens of folders, invoices, expense reports, internal memos, with edits that didn't match the final versions. I didn't sleep, not because I was afraid, but because for the first time, I had something real, something undeniable. Maya had given me more than evidence. She'd given me proof that I wasn't crazy. That's what I saw was real. And that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't in this alone anymore. 2 nights after Maya gave me the flash drive, I found something that didn't fit. It was a reference buried in an old memo chain about a subsidiary called Red Harbor Analytics. The name didn't show up in any official acquisition records, but the memo clearly discussed asset absorption and internal integration. Maya swore she'd never heard of it. We cross-checked old emails and found a calendar invite from a year ago. A private off-site meeting, invite only, no minutes recorded. Maya remembered booking the space but was never told what it was for. The names on the invite were mostly execs, but one jumped out, a junior finance manager who left shortly after that meeting. I searched the internal system for Red Harbor. Nothing. No vendors, no filings, no project folders. But I did find one shred a log entry showing a file had been deleted 2 months ago from the legal archive, 20 minutes after midnight. The user ID matched David's assistant. A new one. Someone loyal. That was enough for me. I started asking quiet questions. Small things. Casual tone. I borrowed someone's ID badge to check the archives on a floor nobody visited. I pretended I was working on an audit. Nobody questioned me. Nobody ever questions the woman holding a clipboard who looks like she's just doing admin. The more I dug, the more I realized this acquisition wasn't just hidden. It was scrubbed. No purchase orders. No contracts. But Maya found a leaked email in the drive from David to a shell company in Delaware. It mentioned consulting fees and due diligence coded language for off-the-books payments. I printed everything, stored copies offline, even sent one set to a backup Gmail I hadn't used in years. Then David stopped by my desk. He didn't say anything directly, just leaned over the cubicle wall and asked how things were going. Said he heard I was on some new projects. Smiled like a man who already knew the answers. My blood ran cold. But I smiled back. Told him things were busy, but manageable. I appreciated his concern. When he left, I didn't move for 10 full minutes. I knew what that smile meant. He was on alert. He didn't know what I had, but he knew I was moving pieces. And for the first time, I think he realized I wasn't playing defense anymore. I was hunting. Quietly. Intentionally. With proof just out of reach, but getting closer by the hour. 3 days before the board meeting, I got an official notice from HR. I was being placed on administrative leave pending investigation for suspected financial misconduct. No details, no hearing, just a cold line of text buried inside a polite email. David had made his move. He was accusing me of embezzlement. According to the rumor mill, I had diverted consulting funds, fabricated receipts, and used my compliance access to cover the trail. It was absurd, but it didn't need to be true. It just needed to spread fast enough to stick. My badge still worked, which meant someone up the chain was buying time for me. Madeline, maybe. Or someone watching how this unfolded. I stayed late that night, prepping the only thing that mattered. I had one chance in that boardroom. One moment to flip the narrative and bury him before he buried me. The proof came from an old server backup Maya had unearthed. It was a recorded video conference from a vendor onboarding call, grainy, time-stamped, and forgotten. David was in frame, calm, confident, instruct the third-party firm to retroactively update data for an upcoming risk disclosure. His words weren't vague, they were precise. He told them what to say and how to say it. Then he looked right at the screen and said he'd take care of anyone who made noise. I didn't edit it. I didn't cut a second. I saved it onto a secure drive and printed the full transcript on company letterhead. When the boardroom filled the next morning, the tension felt combustible. David arrived in a charcoal suit, flanked by 2 legal reps, and a confidence so thick it clogged the air. He spoke first. Said he regretted bringing these concerns forward, but had a duty to protect the company. He painted me as unstable, vindictive, disgruntled over being passed over for promotion. He handed out a timeline, presented a spreadsheet. It looked clean, professional, almost believable. Then it was my turn. I didn't rebut. I didn't plead. I plugged in my drive and hit play. The room went still, then colder. David's voice echoed off the glass. His instructions, his smirk, his closing line is about silence being a condition of survival. When it ended, I looked directly at the chairwoman. No one spoke for a long time. David's attorney whispered something. David didn't respond. He was staring at the screen, blinking too fast. That was the moment everything turned. And for the first time, they didn't see me as a problem. They saw me as the solution. I didn't sit down after the video ended. I stayed standing at the head of the table, holding the next folder in my hand like it weighed nothing. But it did. It carried every ounce of risk I had taken to get here. Inside were bank records, wire transfers, ownership documents for a holding company registered in the Cayman Islands, all tied to a name no one in the room had ever heard until I said it aloud. That name was David Crane's wife. David didn't flinch at first, but the second I laid the final sheet on the table, his eyes dropped. A notarized document, his signature, his authorization code. Funds moved from our company through layers of shell firms until they landed safely offshore. I didn't scream. I didn't gloat. I let the numbers speak. I let silence do what my voice never could. A board member asked where the records came from. I told them I had help. People had been afraid for years, that I had simply listened. David's lawyer leaned in to whisper something again. This time, David shoved the chair back. His voice cracked as he said the words he thought would protect him. That it was a misunderstanding. That I was twisting details. Then someone knocked. 2 federal agents stepped into the boardroom. Calm. Quiet. Professional. One of them read a name. David didn't argue. He stood up slowly, like he couldn't believe it was happening. As they placed cuffs on his wrists, he turned toward me. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. For once, David Crane had no words. They walked him out without drama. The board didn't move. No one touched their phones. It was like they were afraid to shatter the moment. Madeline cleared her throat and looked at me. She asked if I would consider taking over as interim director of ethics and compliance. I nodded once. I didn't smile. I didn't feel victorious. I felt still. Because this wasn't about winning. It was about stopping something that had gone unchecked for far too long. About proving that the quiet ones notice everything. And that sometimes, we hit back smarter. As I finally sat down, the weight in my chest loosened. Not because it was over, but because I knew. Finally, it had begun. The weekend after everything ended, I drove home to see my parents. My dad was out front, trying to fix the old fence he always said he'd get around to one day. I took off my jacket, grabbed a second hammer from the shed, and started helping without saying much. We didn't talk about the boardroom or the headlines. We talked about weatherproofing and the new neighbor's dog that wouldn't stop barking. But every now and then, he'd glance over at me like he was still trying to understand what had changed. I felt different, not bigger or louder, just more solid. Like all the parts of me I used to second guess, had finally clicked into place. He asked if I regretted any of it. I didn't answer right away. I thought about the fear, the nights I barely slept, the friends who disappeared when things got messy. And I thought about the people who showed up. Quietly, steadily, the way Maya had, the way Madeline had, even if she never said the words out loud. What I told him was this: I didn't go looking for a fight, but when it came, I didn't run from it. I was faced with the truth, with proof, with the kind of quiet courage I used to mistake for silence. That night, I sat on the porch as the sky turned soft and orange. My phone buzzed with a message from HR confirming my new title. It didn't feel like a reward. It felt like a responsibility. I keep thinking about all the people still out there, sitting in meetings where their voices get flattened, their names mispronounced, their work dismissed, people who get told they're just a number, just a role, just a girl who should stay in her lane. If that's you, I want you to hear this. You are not small. You are not alone. And sometimes, the smartest move isn't shouting louder. It's planning longer, waiting for the right moment, then striking so cleanly they never see it coming. Have you ever had to fight smart in silence? Share your story. You never know who might need it.